Welcome to video 4 of this Mindset Masterclass. I'm David Bayer, and I'm excited to get into this video with you. This is kind of the halfway point of this conversation about real transformation. And at this point, you've realized that no one has ever actually taught you about thoughts and thinking and beliefs and decisions and how the human being operating system works. And what we've been talking about is really the differentiator between the people who are creating extraordinary things in the world and the people who are struggling and limiting themselves. So this is the secret, right? It's how to operate your extraordinary technology at a whole new level. And really it's about how to identify the limiting beliefs or patterns of thinking that have been holding you back and to give yourself permission to make new decisions and step powerfully into a new possibility. So we've talked about that. We've talked about the brain as a goal-achieving machine. We've talked about this as a technology. We've talked about the idea of creating images and why visioning and imagination is so important. And by the way, make no mistake, I'm not suggesting you can just sit around and imagine and envision your life all day. It requires massive inspired action to create something extraordinary in the world, whether it's extraordinary health or extraordinary relationships or extraordinary impact or an extraordinary business or extraordinary bank account. But ultimately what we do is we need to get this technology working for us. So as you go into the world now, armed with a new capacity, which is the power of decision, what I want to do is I want to give you an emotional guidance system to help you identify when you're in your personal power and when you're not, right? When are you powerfully creating in alignment with what you want to create in the world, and when are you operating in a limiting belief and holding yourself back? So I want to introduce a concept to you. This is a framework by which you can operate your entire personal development world, and that is something that was taught to me by one of my mentors, which is there are two states of being, okay? There's only two states of emotional being. And there are beautiful states of being and suffering states of being. And so stay with me because we'll close the loop on this. This is an important part of the framework that I've been teaching you. It plugs directly into the power of decision. Beautiful states of being and suffering states of being. So what are beautiful states of being? Well, beautiful states of being is when you're being calm, excited, joyful, curious, right? Pretty much everything that feels good is a beautiful state of being. Suffering states of being are stress, anxiety, overwhelm, right? What you might experience when you're comparing yourself to another person, jealousy, right? Feeling not good enough. These are suffering states of being. They don't feel well. So we have beautiful states of being, suffering states of being. Now what's important for you to understand is that you are always in one state of being or the other. There's no period of time where you are not being anything. And you are never in both states of being at the same time. Okay? You're either in a beautiful state of being or you're in a suffering state of being. Why is this important? It's important because any time that you notice that you are in a suffering state of being, what's happening is that there is this thinking taking place, and they are limiting beliefs, right? There's a pattern of thinking that's taking place that is not serving you well in your life. Remember, the name of this game is to start becoming aware of our limiting beliefs, to identify them, to realize that beliefs are decisions, to make new decisions, and in that process, recreate who we are by creating new images, changing our brain, and completely transforming our lives. This is the science of creation. So there's two states of being, and any time you've moved into a suffering state, you know that what's happening is that you are experiencing a pattern of thinking which is a limiting belief, okay? So there's no judgment around this. It's not that, good people live in a beautiful state of being and bad people live in suffering states, or there's something wrong with you because you're stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. So you shouldn't criticize yourself for being stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. But what we can acknowledge is that you cannot create powerfully from a suffering state of being. In a suffering state of being, you're not creative, you're not inspired, you don't have vital energy, right? You're not intuitive. You don't have access to this extraordinary reservoir of intelligence, this infinite intelligence that we have access to. You've basically cut yourself off from your power. And so again, if we want to have a powerful living experience, what we need to do is become aware of when we've moved into suffering and we've cut ourselves off from our power and our creative capacity, and to learn how to move back into a beautiful state of being, because that's where everything that we want is, right? That's where creativity, inspiration, intuition, connection, presence to life, the ability to be compassionate, the ability to understand things at a deeper level, all of that which we want exists in a beautiful state of being. So you're always in one state of being always in one state of being or the other. You're never in both states of being at the same time. Suffering is the problem, and what we need to do is we need to learn how to move back into a beautiful state. So suffering is always going to show up, by the way, right? It's a mechanism, it's an experience, but we don't have to spend that much time in suffering. So one of the things I want you to think about is how much time you spend in suffering on a daily basis. So if you were to look at your average day, right, and you were to add up all the time that you were stressed or anxious or overwhelmed or feeling not good enough or feeling like there wasn't enough time or feeling guilty for not doing something or thinking you should do something or you shouldn't do something, all of that, right? Like I used to be a morning sufferer. I would wake up in the morning, I would lay in bed, I would be overwhelmed, not knowing how I was going to get all the things done that I thought I needed to get done in the course of that day. And you may be productive while you're suffering. It doesn't mean that you're just sitting there huddled in a corner, you know, in the corner of your room. You may be working on the computer, you may be communicating with people, but in the background, right, is this suffering. So I want you to come up with your number. How many hours a day do you spend in suffering? 1 hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, 12 hours? Every waking hour of your day, this suffering thing is going on in the background. And I want you to comment below, because this is really going to help you see for yourself. And again, this is a safe place. This is the place where we can be vulnerable for you to say, you know, how I spend 8 hours a day in suffering, and most of the time I'm in overwhelm or anxiety or stress. Okay, great, like great acknowledgement. It's the acknowledgement of that that is going to allow us to change that. But the reason why I want you to see how much time you spend in suffering is because if you multiply that by the number of days in the year, right, 365 days, if you're spending 2 hours a day in suffering, which by the way is far less than most people, you're spending over 700 hours a year disconnected from your power, not using your time efficiently, not tapping into your genius, not living into your greatness. And the reason why I want you to see this is because I want you to become fully committed and convinced of the fact that the number one thing that's preventing you from having the life that you dream of living and creating the type of business that you want to create is suffering. That's the problem. It's not that you don't know how to do something. It's not that you don't have clarity. It's not that you don't have a team. It's not that you haven't discovered what you're passionate about yet. It's the suffering thing. Because if we can eliminate the suffering, in those 700 hours that you would gain back every year, you would get clarity. You would discover your passion. You would find a way to attract the team. You'd figure out how to do all the things that you need to do, but you can't do that from a suffering state. So another distinction, so comment below, let me know how many hours a day you're spending in suffering and kind of where's your emotional home, right? Is it overwhelm? Is it comparing yourself to other people? Is it feeling not good enough? And so now that we've identified that, what we want to do is we want to take a closer look at this thing called suffering, which we now know is the problem, right? Suffering is the problem. And we want to acknowledge the fact that suffering, the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm, it's separate from any experience that we have, right? There's no suffering in any experience. I could shoot this video and not feel like I shot this video very well, and I could suffer about it. But there's no suffering, right, within the experience of not shooting a video as well as I might have thought I could shoot it. The suffering comes from my thinking about this experience. So there's no suffering in any experience. Someone could come up to you and yell at you and tell you that you're no good. There's no suffering in that. It's just an experience. It's the meaning that I give that experience for myself that creates my own suffering. And I want you to really get clear on this. Like, the only cause of suffering is the meaning that you give an experience. It's not in the experience. It's not in the natural world, right? We never see a squirrel that's stressed that it's not going to find a nut. We never see birds that are worried that they're flying in the wrong direction for a more temperate climate. Man is the architect of his own suffering by the design of his own thinking, right? So when you realize this, it's incredibly powerful because there's an acknowledgement that there is no stress, anxiety, or overwhelm in the world, that I'm the creator of it. And if I'm the creator of it, I can also be the eliminator of it. So suffering is separate from the experience, and all suffering, this thing that we've identified as the problem, is caused by our own thinking, okay? Now in the next video, what I want to do is I want to show you what to do with this thinking that is causing the suffering, which is the only problem. I'm going to give you the solution to it. I'm going to teach you the process by which you've identified that you're in a suffering state, because you realize, oh my God, I'm stressed, I've moved into a suffering state. You acknowledge the fact that this experience isn't causing the suffering, it's my own thinking about this experience that's causing the suffering, and you have the ability to now go look at that thinking and go, well, what do I think about this? Oh, I think I didn't do a very good job. I think that they don't like me. That's what's causing you your stress, or your anxiety, or your overwhelm, or your jealousy, or your guilt. And I'm going to teach you what to do with that thinking so that you can immediately move back into a beautiful state and reconnect with your personal power and move powerfully forward. And some of you may have already started to see that this thinking that's causing the suffering is the same thing we talked about in the first 3 videos, which is it's these limiting beliefs, right? So not only are these limiting beliefs problematic because your brain is a goal-achieving machine and your brain is trying to bring those limiting beliefs into reality, but at the same time, these limiting beliefs are causing suffering, which is disconnecting you from your personal power. And in the next and final video, I'm going to teach you our process for reconnecting with your personal power, for moving back into a beautiful state, for aligning yourself with the decisions that are going to create the business and type of life that you dream of, so make sure you don't miss it.